Welcome back to How Soccer Explains Leadership. Thanks again for being a part of the conversation. I'm Phil Dark, your host, and unfortunately, Paul Jobson's not able to be with us for this interview, but he'll be back on with us next time. But today, I am really excited. I have a good friend of mine, and I have a man who has been doing ministry for a really long time, doing some ministry all over the world through wrestling and other sports, Olympics, all kinds of cool stuff going on. We're going to let him share that with us. Carl Dambman, how are you doing?
Hey, I'm doing great. It's thanks, Phil. We've talked about this a couple of times, and we actually set a time, and we're doing it. So I'm glad to be here on a soccer or football podcast, even though I don't know how to kick the ball, so it'll bend and go in the upper right hand corner of the goal.
Well, we've had all kinds of sports here. Never had a wrestler on, so I'm excited for this. I'm excited for this. But it's getting to the point we've had so many other sports that it's almost maybe should be how sports explain leadership. But we're not there yet. We're not there yet. We might get there one of these days. But that's basically what we've turned into. We always love, hearing the story, hearing just, brief story. Obviously, I'm sure it could spend the entire interview just sharing your story, but just how you developed your passion for wrestling, for ministry, leadership, and and where God has you today.
Well, Phil, first of all, whenever I introduce myself, I like to explain to people that soccer or football is the world's most popular sport, and that's hands down, no
Yeah.
question about that. But man's oldest sport and God's favorite sport is wrestling. And you chuckle, and people usually laugh, and I say it's not a joke. Uh, if you read the Bible, which I do, and I know you
hmm
do. If
hmm
you look in Genesis, there is an account where Jacob
Yes.
meets with either God or an angel of God, or it could be uh, the pre-incarnation of Christ, a Christology. But he wrestles. They
Yeah.
don't kick a ball around, and he holds on for a blessing, and then he ends up having a limp, and I have a little bit of a limp too from 28 years of intense wrestling, and but I it's a reminder for Jacob, that his name has been changed from Jacob to Israel, which mean one who wrestles with God. So anyway, that's how I introduce my when ever I'm speaking to a group, and so uh, I I respect soccer. I've seen some of the greatest soccer players in the world play. I went to the European Championships 2012. I saw the quarterfinals, the semifinals. So it was
Awesome.
England against Italy, and uh, it was Spain against Portugal, two of the greatest countries in soccer. I saw 4 hours of live soccer, not a single goal. And so, 90 minutes, no goal, 30 minutes, no goal, twice. And I joke to my friends who understand soccer that maybe they should just do the penalty kicks at the beginning and save a lot of time. That didn't go over so well. But
Yeah. Yeah.
soccer's a great sport. And to be honest, Greco-Roman wrestling, I've seen a lot of wrestling where it's 0-0, 0-0,
Yeah.
and unless you understand the sport and you understand the technique, you understand the defense, the counters, and all that stuff, it can be boring if you don't understand the sport.
Yep.
But
Absolutely.
soccer's hands down is the most popular, the greatest sport, and we've got it coming to North America a year from now, less than that, in June and July,
Yeah.
the World Cup of men's soccer, or I think they call it football. So
Yeah.
FIFA is coming to North America, and we're getting ready.
Yeah. It's exciting. It'll be fun. It'll be fun. So how did you get into wrestling, and what, and just, and how did that lead to ministry using wrestling?
Yeah, well, it's interesting because I wanted to be a basketball player. We had a hoop in our backyard, nice blacktop, and we had the best hoop in the suburban Philadelphia area, at least in my neighborhood. And so all the guys would come over and play buckets. We'd play basketball, and I really liked basketball. I was decent, but then when I got to seventh grade, I was 12 years old, and our junior high had the best wrestling team in the area. They had gone about 50 matches and never lost. They were
Hmm.
undefeated for like 5 years. And so the coach at lunchtime sat down with me and he said, Carl, you're one of the best athletes, and I'd really like you to come out for the wrestling team. I said, but coach, I I'm planning on playing basketball. And he says, well, all our best the basketball teams maybe 500. They win some, they lose some, but we never lose in wrestling. And I'd really like you on the wrestling team. Well, he also said, if you want to get an A in gym, you know, it's 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 better to be a wrestler. And anyway, as a 12-year old, he told me what a good athlete I was. I went out for wrestling, and I was actually pretty good at it. I had good balance, and I had excellent coaching. So I had very good coaching, seventh, eighth, and ninth grade. Then back then, high school started in 10th grade, and I had an excellent coach who was a heavyweight. And by the time I got to be in 11th grade, I was 240 pounds.
Oh, wow.
And so I was a pretty big guy. But the problem with lightweights and heavyweights is not having a good workout partner. The
Mm.
guys in the middle, there's lots of guys. There in high school, there's either 13 weight classes. Some places there's 10 weight classes. Internationally, there's 10 weight classes. To get a heavyweight to train with you, and my college coach always said, you migrate to the level of your competition. So if
Hmm.
you've got a really good workout partner, he's going to push you, he's going to make you better. If you've got a weak workout partner, then you're going to get sloppy and you're
Yep.
going to get worse. And when I so in high school, my workout partner was the assistant coach, and he was an All American at the University of Pittsburgh. And then in college, my his uncle was my workout partner, and he was my coach, and he was a three-time All-American at Penn State. And so these were guys that just beat the tar out of me every day, but they were also strong Christian men who told me that Jesus loves me,
Mm.
and that was a big part of building character, building strong athletes, but then building men or women for life off of the mat or off of the field or off of the court, out of the court. So life, I had that example uh, from the early days on that a coach doesn't train you just for the match. The coach trains you for life.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And then, and so you wrestled in college, you ended up going to the Olympics, right?
Well, then I joined Athletes in Action, which is a
Okay.
Christian sports organization, and they got in touch with me and they said we need a heavyweight. The guy that was with the team, he left them after a couple of years, took a coaching job, and so they asked me to join Athletes in Action. So I from having an All American as a coach, my coach then was an Olympic champion. So I always got beat up in the wrestling room. I was always looking forward to the matches when I could actually win, and because getting beat up in the it wears you down, but it builds you up. So then working out with John Peterson, who was my coach every day. The rest of the team would leave, and John say, "Dambman, you're staying." And he would work with me for another half an hour or 45 minutes until I couldn't stand up anymore.
Hmm.
But that really helped my endurance, and it really helped me get better uh, as a wrestler. So I did get to go to the Olympics as an alternate. which meant that I was the in Montreal, I was the number three guy. They took two alternates. I lost to the top guy, and but it was an honor, to get the uniform, to
Hmm.
be there, be with the team, and watch the competition. So that was a real highlight of my early career.
Yeah, that's awesome. And as you said, you joined that staff with Athletes in Action. You've been doing that since for probably 15, 20 years or so, right? Something like that.
Well, that was back in 1975,
Yeah, right.
and then all of a sudden, 50 years goes by.
50
You know,
years.
yeah.
That's crazy.
So,
So I was one when you joined Athletes in Action. So there you go.
well, you were a lightweight then,
I
I
was a
think.
lightweight. I was
Yeah,
very much a lightweight. I would have had
yeah.
trouble finding a workout partner. Um, but so we'll get into. I want to definitely get into the ministry aspect and your years and years and different stuff there. And obviously, you've written a book about that, so we're not going to be able to. You've literally written a book about it. So usually say we could write a book about it, but you have. So we'll get to that in a bit. But before we do, I just want to hear. We always all the other thing we like to do is just to hear kind of what is your personal why, your life purpose, and how are you living it out? What does that look like?
Mhm. Well, yeah, when it first started, I wanted to continue to wrestle, and it's not like some sports where, after college you go on into the pros,
Hmm. Hmm.
whether it's basketball or football or soccer or football or some other sports. But with wrestling, there wasn't anything except there were a couple of clubs that you could join. New York Athletic Club, Chicago had a club, San Francisco had a club, and Athletes in Action was the Christian club. And
Right.
we would, so I joined Athletes in Action. We would travel around the U.S. and we would share our faith. And so when I finished college, and it took me a while to finish college, I crammed 4 years into six,
Nice.
and one of your questions as I was looking at the outline is, what would you tell your 25-year-old self that you would do differently? Well, I'd go back to my 18-year-old self and I'd say, go to class. All you have to do is show up at class. I never missed workout,
Yeah.
but I didn't always get up for the 8 o'clock English class. And that's why it took me 6 years to get through college. And then I didn't even have my degree until a couple of years later. And my wife helped me finish up a few of my classes and submit some papers. And I did get a degree like 10 years after I started college.
Wow.
So I would tell myself, go to class, dummy,
Yeah.
because I was smart enough. I just, yeah, you have to go to class in order to be able to answer the questions usually.
Amazing how
So
that works. I wish I could tell
yeah,
my students that too where I teach. So, but I do
yeah,
tell them, and it doesn't help very much. So, anyway.
yeah. Uh, so anyway, what is my why? Uh, well, I realized as I was in college, I wasn't walking real close with the Lord for a while, and I realized I wanted to, and I needed some accountability. I needed some people around me to encourage me. And so when Athletes in Action contacted me, said I could come down and work out with them, and uh, I really liked the guys. I really liked the opportunity to continue to wrestle because I thought I still had some good years in me because I was 25, and so I joined Athletes in Action, and that really gave me a purpose because I needed uh, mentorship or discipleship in my own life. And I wanted to be able to do that for other people. I wanted to be able to share my faith. So we we would speak to 75, 76, 77. We had two teams. We had an East team and a West team. And our East team, we spoke to about 100,000 people in live audiences every year. We back then you could share the gospel openly in a lot of schools. Uh, Nowadays you can't do that. But so we would do assembly programs for several hundred up to 1,000 people. We'd go to college campuses. We'd compete against the universities. We were good. We won the national championship in freestyle wrestling, which is one of the two Olympic styles, freestyle and Greco-Roman. So we won the national championship my first year, and so it was a great opportunity. I joined the team. I was wrestling well, and mostly because I had a great coach. Uh, yeah, as you know, uh, your coaches have a big impact on you, and then also your teammates, and you have to be able to benefit from that. And I did. I benefited. So my why was so I could share my faith in Jesus Christ, and I could use the world of sport, and I could get better. I loved competition. I liked winning better than losing, but you learn from losing. If you don't get beat, you miss some life lessons. So
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, and part of that has been, as you're saying, you share the love of Jesus Christ, share the gospel with others. And a big part of what you've done over the years is chaplaincy work, and chaplain at the major sporting events, the World Cups, the Euros, the Olympics, the different places that you've been saying that you've even mentioned already. But what does that look like, and when you're going to these, maybe a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, maybe for these events and with these elite athletes, and how are you, so many times elite athletes, as we know, it's very much their own, my achievement. It's all about me, especially in individual sports that, you've been working with. But what does that look like to, um, how have you used that why to reach those elite athletes, and share the gospel with them and be able
well,
to even
first of
follow up with
all,
them? What does that look like?
first of all, I'll say that at these major sports events, the Olympics or the World Championships, that's not the best place
Yeah,
to do ministry.
right.
The best place is at their local club, at the national training camps. When we were living in Europe, we would go to Poland, Czechoslovakia, Hungary. We were living in Austria for 6 years, and then in Germany for another 6 years before we moved to Russia. But we would go and we'd work out. Uh, I was still training. We'd work out with these guys. We'd be on the mat with them a couple times a day. We'd have meals with them at the sport hotel, and then we'd have Bible studies at night.
Yeah.
And this was during the communist era where uh, some of the countries said it's absolutely forbidden to believe in God. Others were more open. A lot of people don't even realize that during the 80s, there was a Cold War going on, and Europe was divided. And
Yeah.
we were living in Austria. We were just an hour away from Czechoslovakia. Uh, and then we moved to Germany, and we're just a couple hours away uh, from the Eastern Bloc of countries, the Soviet bloc. And Czechoslovakia was very strict. Bulgaria was very strict. Poland was a little more open. Hungary was a little more open. So each country, because of their culture and heritage, had a little different feel. But we, as Americans, were welcomed by the sports federations because they wanted to work out with us. They wanted
Yeah.
to train with us, and they wanted to learn a little bit about the American style, and it helped their team. So we would go and work out, and then we would share the gospel. The Polish coach, now I'm not on the chaplaincy thing yet, but I will get
Yeah.
there.
I
Uh,
know you will.
but yeah, the thing is that, like the Polish coach, because Poland has a strong strong history of Christianity, particularly Catholicism, uh, and uh, the coach said, "Hey, I can teach them technique, I can teach them tactics, I can teach them physical training, but I need you guys to teach them the spiritual foundation."
Hmm.
And so that's coming from a coach at the highest level in Eastern Europe was quite a compliment. the interesting thing, and we had the openness to share the gospel with those guys because we were in a sports context, and the coach knew what we were doing. Obviously, not everybody knew what we were doing because it was dangerous uh, if the government found out what we were doing. But in Czechoslovakia, it's a lot tighter. And the coach one day pulled me into his room, pulled down the shades, put a pillow over the telephone, which had a line leading in before cell phones and all that. Put a pillow over the telephone, turned the radio up, and then he said, Carl, I'm a radish. I'm red on the outside, but I'm white all the way through. And I believe in God, but I can't let people know that because I'm a
Mm,
communist party
mm,
member. And for me to be the head coach, I've got to be communist. So
yeah.
if you talk with the guys, we showed a film called the Jesus film, and we had it in the local languages. So we showed that to the guys. He said, I can't be there when you show that film.
Mm,
And if you want to talk to the guys about religion, I'm going to leave the room. So he told me that he's on my side, but he can't let that, or
yeah.
else he'd get fired. So
Yeah.
that was so it's interesting the difference there. But the
And that was
coaches were
probably
all
pretty
for us.
normal, right? That was like a normal thing, presumably, right? When you
Yeah,
were over there.
and the coaches knew what we were about, but the value of having us there at a sports level, and also they wanted their kids that they didn't want their guys going out and getting drunk and doing drugs and all that stuff. A lot of times USA Wrestling had athletes in action or Fellowship of Christian Athletes be with the teams because they knew our standards, they knew our morals, and they wanted us to have the influence on the team. So many times I was a team leader with the USA team when they came to Ukraine or came to Belarus or they came to Russia. They wanted me, and the team leader is just the team gopher. It means it's the guy that gets the water, sets up the taxis, sets up, make sure the sauna is working, make sure everybody gets checked into the hotel. So it's a servant leadership role, which is what we as Christians believe that's the best way to lead is by serving people.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And there was tremendous opportunities to be able to do that there. And it is interesting you say that because I went to Ukraine in 95 and I just tell people you saw the remnants of the Cold War and of the the Iron Curtain and the communism and everything. And I mean, it was still, that, but it was just the beginnings of the Soviet Union being kind of broken up into these different countries. And but when you were
Mhm.
there, it was the USSR. It was the one, communist country that was not, like you said, open to it. How your book really goes into the details of this. So I just want to take this opportunity to share, your book is In God's Grip. How can people get that book? Is it on Amazon? Where can you find that book?
Well, it is on Amazon, and I do have a copy of it here. I got an even better book here.
Yeah,
It's called the Bible. But yeah, this is the book in
there it is.
God's Grip, and on the cover is a little guy in blue, and that's me. I mean, at that, that picture was taken by my wife back in 1978,
Wow.
and I was 235 pounds. My opponent's 400 pounds.
Oh my goodness.
Uh, yeah, and so
You were
I
how big
did
in
win.
that? How big were you? You say?
I was 235. So
You were
he's
235. You look like you're like 120 in that picture. Because
yeah. Well, I wrestled this guy Erlen Van Liftejude, and he was quite a guy. He wrestled for New York Athletic Club. He went to MIT,
no
and
way.
he he was a computer programmer, opera singer, and even was in some movies with Arnold Schwarzenegger and other people as the bad guy.
Yeah.
and
Oh, how funny.
so Erlen was quite good. He was also an alternate on the Olympic team, and he had beaten some. Uh, when that picture was taken, the first three guys that he wrestled, he pinned in less than a minute, each guy. And I'd seen Erlen. I'd wrestled him even a couple of years before in the Olympic trials, and so I knew his strengths. And the thing was, you don't let him grab a hold of you and throw you down early, because and so I basically ran away for the first couple of minutes, because I knew if he got a hold of me. And then the referee said, stalling, you got to stay on the mat, you can't run away. And I knew that, but I knew the further, if I moved him around, made him come after me, he sooner or later he would tire out. And
Yeah.
so by the end of 9 minutes, he could barely stand up, and I was able to throw him down. Well, I kind of he kind of fell down. I kind of pushed him
You
down. I
pushed him.
People
Yeah.
say, "Well, did you pick him up and throw him over your head?" I said, "No."
Yeah. Yeah. That
You
wasn't
know,
going to happen. Yeah.
and so I anyway. That's the picture on the cover of the book, and it's kind of symbolic of East and West, and
Hmm.
so uh, I during COVID, you guys remember there was this thing called
Yeah. There
COVID a
was a
few
little
years
thing
ago.
a few years ago.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, it basically I heard that I'm not allowed to go anywhere. I'm not allowed to travel. So people had been telling me ever since we moved to Russia that you should write a book. And I said, I'm not going to sit in front of a computer and type and do all this stuff. And so when COVID hit, I had that opportunity. And one of our sponsors actually had me write the foreword to his book. And he said we should get my writer, Patrick, to write your book. And I said, well, I can't afford it. I don't have. And he said, I'll pay
Mm-hmm.
for it. So
Oh, wow.
Patrick's the writer. I'm the author. So at first I tell him stories, and then he put them. But see, my dad had collected all of our prayer letters, our newsletters that we
Mm,
sent out every month. And so he had 35 years of newsletters that actually backed up the memories that I had, or revealed even things. I said, wow, I didn't realize so many people trusted Christ at that outreach, and it was
yeah.
so that he helped shape it and form it. And it was a team project. I had Patrick helping write it and say, Carl, you got too many stories. You got to
Yep.
stay focused. You got to keep the. And so it's not a autobiography. It's a memoir that starts basically when I'm 12 years old, and the coach sits down at lunch in seventh grade and tells me I need to be on the wrestling team, and that changed the trajectory of my life. And then when I was 18, uh, I trusted Christ as my personal Lord and Savior. Even though I'd gone to church, I thought Christianity was trying to be a good person, go to church for an hour, try to be a good person the rest of the week. But sports was the biggest part. I wanted to be the focal point, and
Mm,
sports helped me do that. And so then when I was 18, and you weren't, this was, even before you were, well, no, you were 4 or 5 maybe by then. And so, no, you weren't
no,
even
I wasn't
around.
born yet. I
Yeah,
wasn't born yet.
1968. I've got to register for the draft.
Mm,
I've got to make a decision about college, where I'm going to go to college. My girlfriend broke up with me, my first serious girlfriend, after I got beat in the wrestling tournament that I
mm,
was supposed to win. And My grandfather died. All these things
mm.
happened within a couple of weeks of each other. And I realized that even though I'd gone to church, had a lot of head knowledge about Christianity, I didn't have a heart relationship with God. So when I was 18 is when I trusted Christ. And I'd like to say then my life, was great. But then, I got off to college, and then you had to choose, am I going to go to the
Mm-hmm.
parties? Uh, go hang out with the football players, or or am I going to go to study and go to class in the morning? And a lot of times I didn't make the right choices.
Yeah.
So there's the battle of
Yep.
the the flesh, the old man and the new man, and so that's why I realized I wanted to serve God because I'd gotten away from God during college many times, and I realized that's not the life I want. So
Yeah.
sorry about getting off track there.
No, that's okay. I just want to, I do want to get back though to the kind of pioneering, like
Sure.
behind the Iron Curtain. I mean, that a lot of I mean, some of the listeners weren't alive back then. But and so it'd be hard to kind of understand that what that looked like. But I mean, it was locked down, right? I mean, it was,
Oh yeah.
and you
Well,
kind of mentioned a little bit, you had to be covert, but like
well
I mean, it's probably
we
like
we
China today, right? The underground church
yeah,
and probably looks a lot
sure.
like that. But so how do you do that? I mean, I know sports was a big part of that, but what did that look like and how did you start
Well,
that
it
knowing
was
like
interesting. It was interesting because we're living in Vienna, Austria, so
mm-hmm,
we're just an hour or so to the border with
right.
Czechoslovakia. Austria is a free country, but
Mm-hmm.
Czechoslovakia was not. So we drive to the border. Now we had to go get visas. You had to get a visa. You have to have your picture on the visa. You have your passport. We get to the Czechoslovakian border, and the guy looks at it, and the purpose of your visit is sport, and
Right.
that's what
Yep,
we're
of
actually
course.
doing. We didn't put sport and evangelism. No,
You're
it
right.
was sport. So you get to the border, the guy, and they've got barbed wire, they got dogs, they've got machine guns, and so they're checking out. They look through your luggage, and the guy looks at my passport, and he looks at my my visa, and he says, "Well, wait, you've got a beard in your visa, but you don't in your passport. This is a big problem."
Hmm.
He says, "You need to shave your beard." uh, or we won't let you in the country. So I had to walk back to Austria, which, it's just a
Oh.
couple hundred yards. And I had a razor, and they had no hot water, no shaving cream. So I had to scrape off my beard and then walk back in, and then they let me in. And that was one of the stories. Another time we're at the Czech Polish border, and all of a sudden they find a box of Amway or Nutrilite vitamins that had been given to us to give to the Polish team because they're getting ready for the Los Angeles Olympics, which they had to boycott because we had
Mm-hmm.
boycotted 1980. So in 1984 was the loss. So we're bringing a big box of vitamins because they had difficulty getting good food,
Right.
even for their elite athletes back in the 80s. Uh, the guy says, "We got a big problem. We think there's traces of opium in your vitamins." I said, there's no opium in the vitamins. They said, "Well, we sat there for 5 hours because they had to take the vitamins, take them they said they take them to a university, did the testing, and then they came back." Well, during that 5 hours, they were pretty excited because they thought they had a big drug bust. They brought out a dog to sniff all the stuff in our van. And so there were 4 or 5 of us guys who were going up there to work out with their national team and give them these vitamins.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden, the dog gets really excited, jumping up and down on one of the bags. They thought they'd found you know, the mother lode
Oh
of
yeah.
drugs. Well, it was my stinky wrestling shoes that the dog was attracted to, and so we sat there for 5 hours and then left. There's many stories of those things, and sometimes they're a little scary
Yeah,
uh,
absolutely.
because we had people that we knew that were arrested because they were smuggling Bibles in, and they found the Bibles, and they were held until the U.S. government was able to come in and free them after a week. And so when we were questioned, we knew it was not a joke. It
Yeah.
was serious. And so you uh, you've got a copy of the book, and there's lots of stories in there,
Right,
and
absolutely. So what did it look like when you get in? When you get past the dog sniffing your shoes, and you get past the vitamins being, being sequestered and tested. You get in, you're doing the ministry. The coaches can't be a part of it, but you're still. I mean, it's not legal for you to be sharing with the athletes either. But you're showing the Jesus film. You're doing. Is this like? I mean, it's obviously covert. It's whatever. But I mean, were you worried about them telling somebody? Like, what did that look like? Because presumably, if they did, you guys would have been kicked out pretty quick, right? I mean, what did that look like?
well, we as we said, we were there to wrestle, and the
Right.
coaches knew, and the coaches knew that we were Christians. And having an Olympic champion as one of your teammates raises the level of your credibility.
Right.
All the guys on the team were national level or had competed in the world championships. I got a bronze medal in the world championships. Was on a couple of Olympic teams as an alternate. So I was a decent wrestler, but I wasn't the best in the world. And but when you bring in an Olympic champion and other guys, and as training partners for these guys, then they're willing to either overlook the Christian side of it, or some of them embraced it, but they
Right.
couldn't wholeheartedly embrace it
Yeah.
because of their position. Uh, when we got to Poland, I believe it was 81 or 82 in December. Uh, we got in late at night. The next morning, we hear an announcement on the on the intercom while we're eating breakfast with the team. We'd just gotten in late at night, and so we're having breakfast. We asked the interpreter, what are they talking about? And he said it was a team doctor who acted as our interpreter, and he says they've just declared war in peacetime, or martial law, as Americans would call it. And
Mm-hmm.
it was the Soviet had just invaded Poland because of the solidarity movement was getting too strong, and they're getting too much freedom. So
Mm-hmm.
that they said you've got 24 hours to leave the country, or if you need to, because it was Sunday morning, if you need to go from one city to the other, you need to get permission from the military to travel after today. Today you can travel. So we're there, and I'm up there. My wife is home in Vienna with two young kids. Uh, most of my teammates, we've got kids back in Vienna. Our wives are back there. We made the decision uh, after praying about it, seeking the Lord, asking some questions, that we were going to stay. God had gotten us into the country. If we had arrived Sunday instead of Saturday, we wouldn't have been able to get into the country.
Mm-hmm.
And there was no communication. So we were just trusting that our wives would be praying for us, and that we would be okay. So we stayed for a whole week. Every night we had Bible studies, because all of a sudden their hope of the solidarity movement freeing the country from communism was taken away by the Soviets. And there was military leaders on the television. All the televisions were just used for their announcements about the martial law. We stayed for a whole week. Every night we had up to 4 hours of Bible study with these
Wow.
guys, because we would start out and we'd share for an hour, and then we'd say, okay, we need to take a break, and the guys would say, no, we don't want to break, we want to learn more. So then we say, okay, what are we going to do this next hour? So we first hour we'd share the gospel, share what we call the four spiritual laws with them. God
Mm-hmm.
loves you. Man separated from God because of sin. The third being that Jesus Christ died for you, for us, and paid the penalty for our disobedience, our sin. And the fourth one being you need to trust Christ as your Lord and Savior. And when I made that decision when I was 18, uh, and we tell the guys this is what, and then they said okay, and then we say okay, then we'll do the follow up. Okay, Well, these are the things that happen when you trust Christ. So we do the follow up of you need to read the Bible, you need to pray, you need to realize that God loves you. Uh, he's part of your life. He will never leave you, never forsake you. And so we give us assurance of salvation. And then they said, okay, we want more. So then we say, okay, we need a break for a couple of minutes to figure out what we're going to talk about next. So then we go to a book of the Bible, and we look at how do you study the Bible? You ask these questions, you know, and there's observation, interpretation, and then application. And so this went on for 4 hours. We did that every night of the
Mm,
of the week. And then finally at the end of the week, we left. We had to get special permission and we had to leave the country. And boy, they went through every piece of clothing and article and just to make sure we weren't bringing out anything. And we were told, you can't tell anybody. When we got to Vienna, there were people who wanted to know, hey, you just came from Poland, what
right.
we were basically told you can't say anything. And because we didn't want to put the spotlight on the covert work that we
Right.
were doing. So,
Absolutely.
yeah. So
That's
forgive me
awesome.
for,
I think that it still goes today because there's obviously a lot of close countries to any sort of proselytization but the power of sport and these countries want to win, right? You go
yeah.
back to Russia, you watch Miracle, you watch these different things that was real. Like if it was something that I think the ESPN did a 30 for 30 on the Russian hockey team, the 1980, the other
Hmm.
side of the story, which
Uh-huh.
was fascinating to see just the amount. So, but the point being the power of sport and how we can use that for good and how we can use that for the gospel is extremely powerful. I know India is similar today, where you can't get in on a regular, visa a lot of the times, but with sports, you can go in as a coach, you can go in as a player, you can go in as whatever. And so,
Yeah.
I think that is definitely still the case.
Well, yeah. And Brazil sent Christian coaches all over the world to coach soccer,
Yeah,
but then to have a ministry there. And they couldn't go as missionaries, but they can go as soccer coaches
that's
or
right.
or players,
Yep,
So it's
absolutely.
yeah.
All right. Well, there's something else that I wanted to just talk with you about briefly is um I know that, you've also been you're just a collaborator. You and I are similar in this way in that we know the power of collaboration. We know the power of, working across different organizations, different countries, different people. I mean, obviously what you're talking about is a form of collaboration, going in and helping other countries with even just with wrestling and coaching. But you've done the International Sports Leadership School with the Global Sport Movement. That's how we met, was through the North. Well, we met through a friend, but we've gotten to know each other better
Mhm.
through the North American Sport Movement. Why is collaboration so important and critical in the ministry world, and how have you seen that in your own life?
Mhm. Well, basically, there is no organization, no church denomination that's got the key. I mean, it's all the same. It's the Great Commission and the Great Commandment,
Yeah,
and we need to work together in order to take the gospel to the ends of the earth. Uh, it's anybody is doesn't understand the world well enough to think that well our organization of 1,000 people or of 5,000 people we can do it. No, you need to do it together, and the the gospel is clear that the apostle Paul always traveled with a team and they didn't always get along. There were some disagreements, some problems, but you need to be part of a team. And when we moved to Europe, uh, a lot of the help we got came from Campus Crusade for Christ or Crew and Athletes in Action, but it also came in the form of other people doing sports ministry. And I had to make the decision: am I going to promote just Athletes in Action, or am I going to promote sports ministry, and not just sports ministry, but using sport to help build the church? You know, we when we moved, excuse me, when we moved to Russia, we were this was 1990. It was still the Soviet Union, and we were the first ones there moving there doing sports ministry. But there were other people doing other ministries, and we worked together. We we helped found a church called Moscow Bible Church. We helped start an international Christian school called Hinkson Christian Academy, named after Bud Hinkson, who was a leader with Campus Crusade for Christ in Eastern Europe and the Soviet Union, uh, and who was my mentor. And he died the last day of the Barcelona Olympics, but in 1992. But Bud, Bud was the guy. Bill Bright and Bud Hinkson were two of my dad was my first mentor. I admired my dad. I love my dad, and he loved the Lord, loved sports, loved family and community. Great role model for me. But Bill Bright uh, challenged us with, "Come help change the world, help fulfill the Great Commission
Mm-hmm.
in this generation." Bud Hinkson was one of the key guys for Europe, and Bud challenged us to move to Europe and bring the wrestling team to Europe to work behind the Iron Curtain. And then he challenged us to move to Russia when it was still the Soviet Union. And because Russia had 300 million people, well, the Soviet Union, there was 300 million people, and they all spoke Russian back then. And I mean, it was the powerhouse of sports. And so, why wouldn't you move to Russia uh, if you wanted to make the biggest impact? And I had been praying for the Soviet Union since 1976. Uh, as you mentioned, I was on the Olympic team in '76, and then right after the Olympics, uh, Campus Crusade for Christ had their staff gathering, 4 or 5 thousand people in Colorado State University. We're there in Moby Gym, and Dr. Bright gives a challenge. Everybody has a blank map of the world. They say, put your name on a country in the world and begin to pray for that country. Well, I wasn't the most spiritual guy. I love sports. I love Jesus. So I put the Soviet Union, USSR. And because they had just won most of the medals. They'd
Yeah.
won 7 out of 10 medals in wrestling,
Mm-hmm.
and they'd won most of them in the other sports too in Montreal. So I put the USSR, and lo and behold, God used that to. We ended up living for 20 years in Moscow. So you got to be careful when
Gotta
you.
be careful what you write down.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
for
So
sure.
that.
All right, Carl. Hey, every interview it goes so fast, and I know we're gonna wrap this one up here. We got a couple questions that we ask everybody. Um, I do want to get you back on. Hopefully, we can get you back on soon with Paul, because I know Paul would have some questions for you as well. That's why we make a great team. He always has these questions that I don't have and don't think about.
Mhm.
He's smarter than me in a lot of ways, but so it just is. I'm probably smarter than him in some ways too. I'm trying to figure those out still. But um, the one question we always love to ask is, how have you used the lessons you've learned? We don't ask this about wrestling, obviously,
Yeah.
but what
Mhm.
how have you used the lessons you've learned directly from wrestling in your marriage and your parenting and
All
grandparenting,
right.
maybe? I don't know.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm gonna share something from the good book, uh, and that's I'm gonna read one of my favorite passages. It says, and this is coming right after the Faith Hall of Fame, which is Hebrews 11.
Hmm.
So Hebrews 12 starts out, therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles, and let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us. Let us fix our eyes on Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy set before him endured the cross, scorning its shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. Consider him who endured such opposition from sinful men, that you will not grow weary and lose heart. So, this is for leadership, for parenting, or even grandparenting. It's first of all, you need to run the race, your race, the race that's set before you. I was a heavyweight wrestler. I wouldn't have been a great striker or a wingman in soccer, uh, and I'm not a marathon runner. Uh, I can barely run 100 yards, but uh, I can defend my turf pretty
Mm-hmm.
well. And
Mm-hmm.
so run the race that's marked for you. Don't run somebody else's race. Fix your eyes on Jesus. Run with perseverance. Jesus is the one who called you into the race. He's the one at the finish line there to greet you. And so that's one of my favorite verses. I tell guys, you got to persevere. You got to keep your eyes on Jesus. You got to finish the race that God set before you. Don't run somebody else's race. That's why I think one of your questions is, what is your why?
Yeah.
What is your purpose? Why? Uh, well, my why is because God changed my life, gave me a reason to live, and gave me the opportunity and the hope for eternal life. I want other people to have that same opportunity. And the reason we moved to Europe, worked behind the Iron Curtain, not in Western Europe where they had freedom, but in Eastern Europe where people said there is no God. You know, the official word was that only weak and old people believe in God. So we knew that wasn't true because God had changed our lives, and so we wanted people to hear the good news. So that applies to leadership. That applies to parenting. That applies to being part of a team. The important thing I think for being part of a team is to know your position, know your
Yeah.
role. A lot of people have told me over the years, and I agree now, that I'm a better number two guy.
Hmm.
So maybe I want to be the CEO, the executive director, or something like that, but that's not my best position. I'm better as the number two guy, an encourager, a team player, somebody that can bring the people together, encourage, and so that's you need to know what role you're playing. I was an offensive lineman, and
Yeah.
they didn't hand me the ball. They had me plow the way so that the guy with the ball could score the touchdown. Now that's in a different football. That's called
I
American
got you.
football.
I got you. I figured that out as you were going.
You
I'm pretty
you
quick
you
like
you
that.
are you are pretty smart. Yeah,
Yeah, sometimes I can figure things out, like that.
yeah.
Although, there have been some offensive linemen like Refrigerator Perry who did run the ball as well, but that was a
I
rare
know.
thing, it wasn't
That's
very
right.
common.
Yeah.
Um, but I love that. Stay in your lane. You know, what it is a great lesson, and I think it is something we know in sports. We know that through, and I think that goes for marriage and parenting and leadership and everything. I've
Well,
actually
let me
learned,
go ahead.
even as you're saying, like the number two and the behind the scenes, like you can do that as a CEO too, because I know that's a lot of what I do, and in the organization that I'm able to run is it's not about me, and how can I make. That's what I tell my kids in sports. That's what I tell my kids, and also people that I'm able to be leading is how can you make everyone around you better? How can you help everyone that you're with flourish? And what does that look like on your teams, on your wherever you are? So yeah, I love that. Well, you were going to say something.
Yeah, let me wrap up with a quick story from Czechoslovakia. The Czech team came to Germany when we were living in Germany, and we hosted them in several Christian families with athletes in action staff, and we had them stay in our homes. We worked out with them. the German club, worked out with them. And uh, later, a few years later, we asked the guys, now some of you guys trusted Christ, asked Jesus to be your Lord and Savior. Was it because we showed you the Jesus film? Was it because of, the Bible studies we did? Uh, they said no. Those things help, but living in your homes, seeing the way you treated your wife, your kids, that had the biggest impact. And so the whole thing about, sharing the gospel is being authentic, not trying to be somebody you're not, but also allowing people to see the mistakes you make and asking for forgiveness. Uh, Christians aren't perfect, but they're forgiven. We're trying to be perfect. We want to be like Jesus, but we mess up because we're still human. But
Yeah.
so that had a big impact on us to that just allow people to come into your homes, see who you are. Don't always meet at Starbucks over coffee to do your Bible study. Have
Yeah.
people come see what it's like in the living room or the kitchen, and be around your kids.
I love that. I love that. All right, last question. What have you watched, read, or listened to that has most impacted your thinking on how wrestling or other sports explain life and leadership?
Well, I think a lot of it has just been uh, just knowing the Bible. I mean, reading the Bible and also seeing Christian films, about like the Jesus film, and I would say combining sport and faith, things like the total athlete, which Athletes in Action talks about, the
Hmm.
body, the mind, and the spirit, or Fellowship of Christian Athlete talks about the 3D coach.
Yep.
How it's important to coach all those aspects. Those things are excellent because a lot of athletes think the scoreboard is what they're performing for. They want to get the victory. No, all athletes want to get the victory, but the important thing is if you lose, does that mean you're no longer worthy? So these the 3D coach, total athlete talk about the importance of the spiritual dimension and doing your best, giving 100%, and then leaving the results to God. We all want to win, but in order to learn in life, you have to lose sometimes. And those are so those two things I think help me and enable me to help others uh, to do better in sports and to do better in life.
Well, thanks, Carl. I love that finishing strong with those recommendations. We'll have those in the show notes. Thanks for being a part of the podcast. Thing. We finally got you on, and I do hope we can get you back soon. Maybe even have this as a two-part release as a two-part episode. With Paul, and there were some questions we definitely didn't get to that I want to. I want to hear what you have to say about those as well. But yeah, thanks for being a part of it.
Well, hey, thank you, and I really enjoyed meeting your family when we were together a couple of months ago, and I'll pray for the healing of the knees and the backs, depending on which part of the family kids
That's
got
right.
their kids got their physical bodies from.
That's
So
right. That's right. I
anyway,
appreciate that.
all
Appreciate
right.
that. And folks out there, thank you for being a part of this. Thank you for listening, engaging in this. I pray that you're using it in all areas of your life. If you want to learn more about Warrior Way and what Paul and Marcy are doing down in Waco, you can check that out, warriorwaysoccer.com. If you want to learn more about Providence and DISC and all the different things that we're doing through Providence World. You can the website providenceworld.com. We'll have all that in the show notes. And as always, folks, we hope that you're taking what you're learning from this show and you're using it to be a better parent, a better spouse, a better coach, a better leader, a better just person in everything that you do. And you continue to remind yourself that soccer, wrestling, and other sports do explain life and leadership. Thanks a lot. Have a great couple weeks.